Hello, everybody. I've written a book called How to Stay Sane. I didn't write it because I knew how to stay sane. I wrote it because I was interested in how we stay sane. I'm a psychotherapist, and people come to see me, and some of them are worried about whether they're going mad or not. And sometimes I worry about that too. But if you're worried about going insane, you very rarely are, because people who are truly insane never worry about that. Yes, a psychotherapist, which means that I facilitate people to go on their own individual paths to find out who they are and to live the best life they can live. And everybody needs to find their own path, I think. One size does not fit all. So I can't say to somebody, I might be able to say to somebody, be more open, but I can't say to everyone, be more open, because some of us need to be more contained. So I'm not going to bring you lots of tips this evening. This isn't about tips. So what I have noticed, though, in my work, that 4 principles are always present when good psychotherapy takes place. And I'll get back to those in a moment. First of all, I'd like to define sanity. We're very good, us mental health workers, at defining insanity. And there's hundreds of personality disorders and mental illnesses that have tick box ways of diagnosing them. But there is no tick box way to diagnose sanity. But I thought I'd better have a go at defining it. Oh, there's a little takeaway tidbit for you. Sanity, what is it? There's only actually 2 ways, I think, of being mad, despite all those definitions of mental illness that we have. And one way is being too chaotic, like this person over here that's falling off a cliff. And the other way of being a bit mad or neurotic, whatever you want to call it, is being too rigid. I define sanity as the broad path that lies between chaos and rigidity. People that are chaotic, and of course that includes me from time to time, are ruled by their feelings. They are their feelings. They are a slave to their emotions. Whereas people that are rigid put all their feelings in a box. So unlike the chaotic person, they have no idea what they're feeling, but they are still, however, ruled by their feelings. Sanity is using your feelings, but not being used by them. Anyway, back to my 4 areas of what happens in good psychotherapy that can be applied to self-help. Self-observation, relationships, stress and stories. And that's what I'm going to go on and talk a little bit about now. Self-observation. I wonder who she's supposed to be. Isn't self-observation self-indulgent navel-gazing? Well, no, it isn't. Because when we become more sensitive to our own feelings, we are actually more sensitive to other people's as well. To develop self-awareness, we need to develop a part of ourselves that's like an observer part, a self-observation part. And this part of ourselves doesn't judge us, but notices what we're going through or feeling at any one time. I'm just going to do a little experiment now, and you're going to do a little experiment actually. What I'd like you to do is just notice your breathing now in the moment. I want you to notice your in-breath, and I want you to notice your out-breath. Take your awareness to your breathing. Thank you. Now, I don't know if you noticed when you took your awareness to your breathing, whether you made a decision to carry on breathing like you already were breathing, or whether you decided to breathe more deeply or more shallowly. The thing is, you gave yourself a chance to alter how you were breathing because you took your observer part to your breathing. Now, we can also take our observer part to our thinking, to our feelings, to our wants, to our desires, and instead of being them, we can observe them. There's a big difference between saying, I am sad, and I feel sad. If you say, I am sad, it defines your whole self. Whereas if you say, I feel sad, you are yourself, and you're having a feeling. There's many ways of doing self-observation. There's meditation, mindfulness, keeping a journal, talking, writing down your dreams. And I'm not going to dictate to you how you should do self-awareness. I'm just going to put it out there as quite a good idea. Relationships. We all need relationships. And just like pressed the wrong button. And just like one neuron on its own isn't much use without another neuron to find a neural pathway with, just as one brain isn't much good on its own. We are pack animals, we need other brains. The notion of an isolated self goes very deep in Western society, but I don't think it's all that good for us. There's an awful lot to talk about in relationships, obviously, but take my word for it, they are essential. I'm just going to talk about ways in which we can take our awareness to our relationships. So just like we changed our breathing, we can see whether we want to change how we're having contact with someone. This is what I call the I syndrome. This is when, instead of having a relationship with the person in front of you, you have a relationship with the projection of yourself. So you don't, in fact, have contact with this other person here, which is why he's looking a bit grumpy, I suppose. Another thing we do when we do eye contact is sometimes we disown negative aspects of ourselves, which we then project onto the other. So if you find yourself disliking someone very much, it might be that you're disliking a part of yourself. But anyway, I is one of the ways we prevent ourselves having full contact with another. It is another way we do it. This is when we change ourselves to be, instead of who we are, who we think the person wants us to be in order for us to get them to do something. I don't know if you're following that, but when we it someone, we're manipulating them. We're treating them like an object. And when you treat someone like an object instead of an equal other subject, you're actually depriving yourself from contact with that person too. I ghost is when instead of having contact with the person in front of you, you're actually having contact with someone from your past. Maybe you have a thing about all authority figures and you project your old headmaster onto them all or something. That's I ghost, because instead of having a relationship with who's in front of you, you're having a relationship with one of your ghosts from the past. You is another way we have contact. And this is when, instead of being who we think we ought to be, we're who we really are, which means allowing ourselves to be maybe vulnerable and maybe taking a risk. So we're open to the other person so they can see who we truly are. And in that way, we give ourselves the chance of true contact, true intimacy with another. And I'm not saying you have to do you all the time. I'm just giving you these examples of how we can be in relationships so you can have a look to see which one you want to choose at any particular time. Right, I'm moving on now to stress. Everybody seems to think it's a bad thing. I've been interviewed a lot in the press lately, and they're saying, oh, are you going to tell us how to calm down in the modern world? No, I'm not. We need enough stress in our lives. We tend to go to the easiest, laziest option unless we keep an eye on it. And if this part of ourselves is where we get into a panic, and maybe this part is where we get catatonic, this part in the middle is the comfort zone. And in order for learning to take place, we need to be on the edge of the comfort zone, with one foot in the familiar and one foot in the unfamiliar. Then we can learn new things and keep our brains flexible and plastic. There's a chap called Dr. David Snowden who's done a nun study, and he interviewed hundreds of nuns and evaluated them for dementia and Alzheimer's. And not surprisingly, he found that the nuns who did master's degrees in their 70s or learnt to ride a unicycle had less instances of dementia and Alzheimer's than nuns who didn't. But what was surprising, that when they died and he opened up their brains, is that the nuns that showed these fewer signs of dementia might have had just as many clots as a nun that showed signs of dementia. But what they did show was plenty of neural pathways. And so it seems that if we do a lot of new learning, which is stressful, we'll make neural pathways which then can find a diversion around a blood clot so we can still keep sane. His research isn't finished yet, but he's thinking that learning and giving ourselves sufficient stress might have something to do with how we build brain reserve. Stories is a big part of our lives. Humans are meaning-making creatures. We are forever weaving a narrative around the events of our lives. And perhaps you tell yourself a story like, I'm the sort of person who blank, blank, blank. And the good thing about stories is that we can edit them, because we continually develop and change as human beings, so we need to edit our stories. And if you're the sort of person that listens to the news every hour on the hour, the story you hear might also be having an impact on you, and you might be thinking that we're living in a more violent, frightening world than we actually are. So we are the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we listen to. And the great thing about stories and meanings is that we can edit them, and successful human beings tend to edit their stories as they go along, and they're not sort of fixed and rigid. So that's another thing. I'm just having a little recap now. In order to stay sane, four lenses you can look at your life through. Self-awareness, relationships. We are formed in relationship with our earliest caregiver, and we carry on being formed in relationships all our lives. So we need to look after our nurturing relationships. Good stress. We need to keep learning and stay curious. Stories. We are our stories, and we can edit our stories. Thank you very much for listening to me.